without the headphones.
Okay, and how's it now?
Much better, much clearer.
This is
Okay, let
what
me
we want.
enhance. Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, good morning, colleagues. I trust you can see the presentation.
Positive. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sanao. I am Oratile, and I'll be speaking to you about the topic that is becoming increasingly important across municipalities in South Africa, and that would be revenue impact for embedded generation, or also known as EG. So as more and more customers are investing in solar PV, the systems, the traditional system of that municipalities use for revenue modeling aren't really going to work. So we need to come up with tariff modernization, and with the right tariff design, we are able to manage the financial impact that comes with the new embedded generation systems, and also support the uptake of green energy sources, while also ensuring that we protect our revenue base. So in my presentation today, we'll unpack the revenue changes caused by small-scale embedded generators and look at real case studies, that were designed, the way tariffs were designed by municipalities, and different strategies were used, where we seek to land at a tariff that is both sustainable and also affordable for customers. All right, so kicking off with changes in revenue from SSEGs. So there are two main concerns that are usually highlighted, which is the reduction in revenue and the decrease in costs. So let's start by understanding the different ways that SSEGs affect municipal revenue. So when a customer installs solar PV, there are a couple of things that would happen. First, they would buy less electricity. That would be a direct revenue loss. However, what we find on the other side is that the municipality also buys less electricity from Eskom, which results in a cost savings. Then if customers feed excess electricity onto the grid, then the municipality would obviously credit them. And again, that would be a revenue cost that lies with the municipality. But as a municipality, we may be able to sell that electricity locally, and if the credit is below our voted cost, then that would result in a revenue gain. So let's look at this in more detail. So our blue block here says compensation for PV feed-in. So customers with SSEG reduce their compensation of grid electricity during the daytime when consuming power from their solar PV SSEG, and that results in a reduction in their electricity bill. On the other hand, and the decrease in costs, it would result in cheaper electricity for the municipality to sell, which in turn reduces their costs. Then looking at the green block, it's a reduction in sales volume. So at times when the SSEG systems generate more electricity than the actual building would consume, the energy is exported into the grid. Then the municipality would compensate or actually give a credit to the customer for this energy, which results in a reduction in the energy bill. Then is therefore a reduction in the revenue for the municipality. In the gray block, we see another balancing act would be the reduction in technical losses. So with the reduction in technical losses, that energy is sold to customers at normal retail costs. So what happens is, if the export credit is lower than municipal purchases, then we're able to recover those costs from electricity that is being consumed on that site. So lastly, one of the last balancing acts would be a reduction in bulk power purchases. Because because our embedded generation system is injected close to the loads, the network losses are reduced on all the networks So that would then result in a decreased loss. So all of these factors, all these 5 factors need to be thought of or balanced out as we design our tariffs. And it's all just an art, I would say, in trying to design the SSEG tariffs. So going back to how our SSEG tariffs are supposed to be broken up into, we have our fixed charge, which is the basic charge. So with this one, it's just basically there to cover our overhead costs within the municipality. Then we have our energy charge, which is then we have an energy charge, which looks at, which is also called an import tariff, and it's a variable charge that will vary from month to month. Lastly, we have our export credit, which is what we'll be designing in our exercises today and in a bit tomorrow. And this is what we would pay the customer, compensate them as they are feeding back electricity onto the grid. All these 3 elements must work together to keep the tariff neutral and fair for both the utility and the customer. Now, here's a look at our 4 case studies. We have Metro 1, Metro 2, and Intermediary City 1 and Intermediary City 2. Now, all these municipalities actually took different approaches to designing the SSEG tariffs. And we look at, okay, so for instance, if you look at Metro City 1, they had a basic charge of 224 cents per kilowatt hour. Metro City 2 was on an incline block tariff, while Intermediary City 1 and 2 had a basic charge at 330 and 402 Rand per month, respectively. And then they also both had energy charges of about 208 for Intermediary City 1 and 203 cents per kilowatt hour for Intermediary City 2. So these were their normal residential charges when they started off on this exercise. So I'm guessing with the different municipalities that are here on the call, maybe you'd find that you fall into one of these categories, even though it's not the same. But if you're on a time of use, perhaps for your normal residential customers, you'd identify more with Metro City 2 and so on. So these municipalities then designed SSEG export tariffs that were broken up into the 3 components that we've spoken about just before, which is our basic charge, our energy charge, as well as our export credit. For Metro City, for Metro 1, we still remain with the basic, we introduced the basic charge, as well as for Metro City. For Metro 2, we also introduced a basic charge. The difference between the 2 would be, I think, let me use a laser point because I'm great. So the difference between the 2, so if you look at Metro City 2, they stuck with the time of use, while the energy charge remained the same as was previously for Metro 1. And then they introduced an export tariff of 108 cents, and then it was 12 cents here. And then with Intermediary City 1, we see that they upped their basic charge just a bit, and then introduced a time of use tariff, which they didn't have because it was first basic energy charge. As well as their export credit was also moved on to a time of use credit. Intermediary City 2 stayed the same with a basic charge, and then also the energy charge remained the same. It's also important to notice that their export tariff, the export credit is also the same as their energy charge. Right. So now we're going to look at what do these new tariffs result in. I'm sorry, it seems like my team's slide is not moving. There we go. Okay. So we'll look at the tariffs that were designed by our respective municipalities. I know the excerpt here is quite a bit small, but I'm hoping we can work around it, having bearing in mind what we had already reviewed in the previous slide. So let's look at what actually before we look at what the resulting changes for each municipality. This is one of the sensitivity analysis that we need to review as we're designing our tariffs within the tariff tool, which I believe Sanal will take you through after my presentation. So this is where we play around to see with the different changes that we introduce in our tariffs, whether we increase our basic charge, whether we move on to a time of use, what would that result in? So with this graph, it shows us the percentage of residential customers with solar PV. So this is looking at as we increase, as more and more customers install SSEG systems, what would that result in? And up on our y-axis, it looks like the change in revenue from residential customers. So above the x-axis would result in a revenue positive situation, and down below our x-axis would result in a negative, in a revenue negative situation, while on our x-axis it would remain revenue neutral. So what do we mean when we refer to all these revenue positive, negative, and what are we trying to work towards? So maybe we should go through the first example and then we work it through from them. So with Metro 2, with the new tariffs that we've designed, as you can see from here, this resulted in we had a low export tariff because it was at about 10 cents per kilowatt hours. And this was a poor business case for our customers. So as more and more customers are installing SSEG systems, the municipality would end up having a lot more, I don't want to say profit, but it would result in a revenue positive case for the municipality. So what we find is that they're making more money as more and more customers are installing SSEG systems. So over time, let's move on to the second. So with intermediary city 2, we have a high fixed charge. So this was sitting at about 380, a fixed charge of 380 Rand per month, which is a form of strong revenue protection to ensure that your basic municipal charge costs are actually covered. They also offered they also moved their customers onto a time of use tariff for the energy charge, as well as a time of use export charge, which we can see down here. This resulted in a revenue positive change for the municipality. So it means that over time, as is the municipality would be making money, more money. They'll be making more money. Intermediary city 2. So with this one, we remained with the same basic charge of 402 Rand per month. And then we also had the energy charge of 104 cents, which remained the same. We introduced an export tariff of 154 cents, which was basically equal to their which is a one-to-one basis, basically equal to the energy charge. So this resulted in a great business case and great business case for customers, as customers would be making quite a bit of money looking at the one-to-one compensation that they'd be receiving. But also customers, not customers, but the municipality over time, with more and more customers installing SSEG systems, would find themselves running at a loss and not being able to recover all their costs. This is despite having a high basic charge of 102 Rand per month. There we go. Metro City One. So with Metro City One, we find that they are at a revenue neutral position. So what we find with them is that they had they introduced a basic charge of 245 Rand per month. They remained with the same energy charge of 171 cents per kilowatt, and then introduced a my words are running away, but they introduced an export tariff of 74 cents per kilowatt. And that resulted in both a win-win situation for both the customer and the utility. So this means that as is the municipality would still be making the same amount of money that it's making, even as more and more SSEG customers are installing systems. So as is, whatever profits or whatever losses are currently being run by the municipality is the same thing that will happen as more and more customers are installing SSEGs. And this is through the reform or with the new introduced SSEG tariff. Right, so looking at our recommendations, I see there's a hand. I'm not sure if I should finish off, then we'll take it, or is it a burning question? I think I'd prefer to finish off, then I'll take your hand, please, Audrey. All right. So what we learn from these examples is that fixed charges are critical to maintaining a stable revenue. So it's ensuring that the municipality is able to recover some of their costs. So this would ensure that stuff such as staff costs are recovered. And then export credits should also be aligned with actual avoided costs. So as we saw, I think it was with the last one, which was the yellow axis, which okay. I'll just take it as someone unmuted by mistake. So I think with the last municipality that we saw, their export credits were slightly lower than their energy charges. So we must also remember that there is a balance that we can strike between the two. So we need to ensure that as we're designing our tariffs, we ensure that the municipality business case is kept up to par, as well as the customer's case is also being considered, because you need to remember that in all this, as we're designing, we're also trying to protect the municipality's business case and ensure that there is revenue recovery, but also we don't want to disincentivize customers to avoid registering their systems, because with that, then we have a situation where we don't have view of what is going on in our networks, which would be disastrous for the more, which would be disastrous. So to wrap up, our final take-home messages would be EG is here to stay, and its impact on revenues cannot be ignored. So tariff modernization is indeed a central part of the energy transition. Tariffs must balance both the interests of the municipality and its customers, and a win-win situation is possible through designing the correct tariff. So we're able to both look out for the interests of the municipality as well as the customers. That's what I said. And then, we can both protect the municipal revenue of both the we can both protect the municipal revenue while also ensuring that there's a reasonable business case for our EG customers. And that's it from me. I believe there was a one hand from Audrey, if I'm not mistaken.
Morning. The slide that showed the different metros and the one in yellow. So if you look at the comparison of the information that was displayed, so the normal residential customers didn't have a fixed charge, so they only applied the fixed charge to the SSEG customers. Because we're looking at this sort of the same thing for our SSEG customers. And then our second challenge probably is trying to get customers to register the solar PV is actually a big challenge in our municipality. And I think probably with us, it's one, the implementation of the basic charge that we are looking at. And secondly, because we don't have export tariffs. And so at the moment, our systems are set up not to allow customers to export. But I suppose at the stage when we start paying them for the export, we probably will have more success in getting them to register. I don't know. I don't know what the experience is in other municipalities, but that is what we are finding here.
Oh, great. Thanks so much, Audrey. And I'd like that you're able to identify yourself within the case studies that we've actually presented. And sure, I'm not sure with the experience of other municipalities, perhaps Sina would have more experience with that or can give more input to that. But introduction of or compensating our customers for the export that they introduce onto the grid would be a great way to incentivize people to register their systems onto the grid. Yeah. I see someone on YouTube. I'm not sure if they're able to. Was that person asking a question? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, I was saying the issue is, every time we speak to the CFO, solar is seen as this animal reducing the revenue of the municipality. So we'll have to build a strong case for compensation.
Absolutely. I think with colleagues on the call, they'll be able to give more input as to how to build a stronger case going up against seniors and convincing them of introducing an export tariff. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe so now you can come in here.
Thank you, Ratile. Thank you for that great presentation. And please just keep the slide up for now until I get into my session. Of course, colleagues, we've got municipalities here, and I'm sure most of them, if not all, are struggling with illegal connections. But of course, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of a custom, right? If we put ourselves in the shoes of a custom, what would make me, let's say I'm a customer, what would make me register my PV, right? What is it? What's in it for me as a customer? For example, if you are a municipality and you have unclear SSEG processes, I don't know what to do to get registered. I won't spend the time to try and figure out what your requirements are. But if you have clear processes, but you are not incentivizing me through some sort of export tariff, then what's in it for me still, right? Because most importantly for me as a customer, I need to improve my business case. I need to pay back this investment as fast as I can so I can start to realize the free electricity. So if you incentivize me, it means that you reduce my electricity bill. So I incur savings on my bill. What do those savings do? They go and assist in the payback of my capital investment as a customer. So for me to register, firstly, I must know what to do. What are the processes to register? The process must be as seamless as possible. That's why we've introduced the online platform. And secondly, the online SSEG application platform, where municipalities use an online platform to process EG systems. So that was trying to make a clear and optimized process, right? But over and above that, there must be an incentive for me. Let's say I'm a residential customer. If you tell me that you are going to credit me, that means I have chances of reducing my monthly electricity bill. I'm happy. I can pay back for my investment as soon as possible. And then I can start to realize free electricity, right? So incentives. But for larger customers, right? When I start to go through the tool, you're going to realize for larger customers, they are unlikely to export a lot of electricity, right? For much larger customers. Most of their electricity they consume, right? Because that's the cheapest form of electricity. Of course, during public holidays or weekends when the production of a particular large customer is low, their base load is low, they will feed back. But mostly, they want to use as much as possible from solar PV. So what makes those guys register? Luckily for you as a municipalities, you will see mostly commercial customers coming to you, nagging you about your processes. It's because luckily for larger systems, mostly they are funded through debt, right? They're funded through debt, and the bank wants you as a municipality to give this customer a pre-approval, right? So they can access that debt to build their solar PV. So you are lucky there, right? It's actually the customer that's going to chase you around to say, what is the process? Because they want to access that debt to finance their capital investment. So they need that paper from a municipality. But for smaller systems that mostly are funded cash-wise, people take out money from their pocket and they buy. You need to provide an incentive, and it is through these sort of mechanisms, export crediting, etc., etc. But of course, colleagues, for customers to comply, it means that even their SSEG systems must meet certain criteria, you know? And the customer, sometimes if they've installed an installation that is not meeting certain regulation, then they won't come to the municipality because you will reject it, you know? So sometimes, of course, especially during COVID, colleagues, we were responding a lot to, during load shedding, we were responding a lot to load shedding. Then many people installed systems that maybe they might not be compliant, right? So it's difficult for them to come to the municipality. So it's all of these factors that I'm discussing with you, but incentives are critical, and also making sure your processes are as seamless as possible. Else, no one is going to come and register. We have some case studies, of course, Ekurhuleni. If they are here, they can share. Ever since they've used the online platform, for example, starting last year, I don't know how many megawatts, close to 20 megawatts or so, they've processed within a short period of time, because now it's easy for the customer to apply, etc., etc. Of course, there's communication, awareness of the importance of PV, etc., etc. But incentives at the very forefront. Okay, colleagues, Ratile, are there any more questions for you before I get started?
There
we go.
Good morning, Oratile.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Oh, hello, good morning.
Hi there, hi. I just want to ask a question quickly. Within the NMBM circumstance, we do have the FSCG tariff or the export credit as well, right? From an incentive perspective, when we introduced it 3 years ago or so, we introduced it at the 1:1 ratio. And as we progressed for the last 2 years, we introduced it as at a 1:2 ratio. And obviously, the customers were very pleased with that. From an incentive point of view, what can we add on to attract more and to make them a little bit more happy? So that not for them just happy, but to keep the sale balanced ultimately, and then obviously to attract some more customers. What would your advice or guidance be in a situation like that, guys? Thank you.
Interesting question. You know, I'm thinking about, I'm trying to find it now. I'm thinking about a bill that I showed very first day. I think, let me just try and find it quickly. So another municipality was providing, let me look for this incentive quickly. Yes. So over and above, so another municipality, over and above the export credit, they introduced a 25-cent generation incentive. So it's over and above the export credit. They then introduced an additional.
So now do you want to maybe share it?
Okay, let me do that quickly. Where is it? Where is it? So this particular municipality, right? Names are expensive. I can't say which one it is. So this particular municipality, if we look at this bill, they have an export credit, right? But also over and above that, they introduced a generation offset incentive, right? Because like I said, from a customer perspective, the most important thing, you want to pay back that investment as fast as possible. And incentives play a critical role in that. So the higher the incentive, the better for the customer. But also don't be in a position where now, for example, because we use an avoided cost principle as per the rules, right? So for example, you are paying R1 a kilowatt hour to Eskom. Now for an EG customer, you want to pay R1.50, right? So you've deviated a bit from, although it's an incentive, of course, I agree, but you deviate a bit from the avoided cost. And also you put yourself as a municipality in potential revenue loss, right? Because instead of buying a cheap unit from Eskom for R1, you would rather buy a cheap unit for R1.50 from an EG customer. So it's great, of course, for the customer, but not so great for you as a municipality. So this is what today we are going to look at. We are going to look at those tariffs of yours, put them in the tool, and then you are going to see as you change the different components of the tool, for example, of the tariff. For example, if you increase the export, what happens to the business case of the customer? Because you want a good business case for the customer, but also you don't want to be in a position where you are losing revenue. So the incentive itself, we are going to play around with it, and we are going to see how that affects the business case. So I say incentive, I am now assuming that everything else is good, right? I'm assuming your processes are clear and they are optimized. So for example, from a Nelson Mandela Bay perspective, other municipalities have moved to online platforms. I'm not sure what the process there is at your municipality, but you know, SSCG applications can pile up if they come in a paper format, which can be discouraging a bit to the consumers, especially the smaller ones. Sometimes it's not worth the time. So you make the process itself optimized and seamless. But also, I don't think there's anything else, colleagues, outside a good incentive, right? And then you add, of course, communication, educating customers about the importance and the safety implications of installing the right kind of components, of following your processes, right? So all of this is complementary to each other. So you can't just say incentives. You must back incentives with the optimized process. And also that you must back it up with communication. The customers must know what your requirements are. They must be very clear. And once they come to you as a municipality, you must respond, right? You must respond timeously. Of course, we know, colleagues, you are inundated with lots of responsibilities. But what mechanisms can you put in place to make sure that the process is as seamless as possible? So it's a multitude of factors complementing each other. But of course, colleagues, you know, from a customer perspective, customers are still complaining about the fixed charge. So how do we deal with the complaints of the fixed charge? You make sure, because fixed charges are informed by cost of supply. So whether a customer has solar PV or not, they must have a fixed charge. You mustn't be in a situation where you only introduce a fixed charge for SSEG customers, but not for normal customers. But they are connected on the same, for example, underground 11 kV cable. How do you justify that this customer who doesn't have PV mustn't pay a basic charge, but the one who has PV must pay a basic charge, but they are receiving electricity through the same cable, through the same fixed cost? You know? So to avoid that thing where customers are saying, you are making us pay for installing solar PV, you are introducing fixed charges, you must, the fixed charge must cut across, must not be reserved only for EG customers, right? Because sometimes I see that in some of the examples that Oratile has shown in that slide, you will see that the SSEG customer now has a fixed charge, but the normal customer doesn't have. When the SSEG customer has a fixed charge, even the normal customer must have a fixed charge, so that there is no discrimination between the different types of customers. So that when someone wants to complain and say, but why are you giving us a fixed charge? They must look at their neighbor without solar PV and see that their neighbor is paying a fixed charge also. All right. So multitude of factors, best approach is to apply all of them. But of course, colleagues, then there's another layer where, a cultural layer where, you know, sometimes people just don't register, you know, but you mustn't stop trying. That one, I have no solution for, where people are just saying, I'm not going to register, you know, why must I register? This is my system. Once you've applied all of these measures and someone says they don't want to register, colleagues, even me, I wouldn't know what to do with that customer, but you must try all of these multitude of factors. Okay, I hope that is sorted. Colleagues, because it's 10:05, over to you, Vuyani.
Now,
Yes, yes.
your understanding, do you perhaps know any unique nationally that applies this rule of basic charge across all customers who have paid
Oh, I can't. Colleagues, Vuyani's microphone is not so great. I'm struggling to hear you. So even the previous speaker, I had to make out a bit what she was saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, boy, I can hear you now.
I'm asking, in your understanding, are there any other Munich that are applying this principle that you suggested of putting a basic charge across various customers?
Colleagues who have SSEG customers, I'm sure you are in the room with SSEG tariffs. Do you have the same basic charge for an SSEG tariff and a normal customer? Anyone, before I answer? Colleagues, of course you have, there are some of you with EG tariffs here. I know this.
So now can I just
Yeah.
maybe interject there?
Oh,
So from I was at Bito municipality before, so we had a basic charge for our SSEG customers. It was not the same for the residential customers. It was not the same as the normal conventional or even prepaid basic charges. The challenge for us is that because we had a plethora of different tariffs for your different per amps charges, like 30 amps, 45 amps, 60 amps, etc., single phase, and then three phase. So what we were struggling to do is to see, okay, how do we deal with the EG, and we were sort of projecting which customer base would typically go for solar, and we try to average a basic charge amongst those basic charges of them, right? So let's say we were looking at the 45 amps and 60 amp customers, and we were saying, okay, if we were to average between these two, where will we land? Now, there will be losses on one and there might be gains on the other one, but that was the way we approached it there. Strangely enough, here at this municipality that I'm helping out now, what they have done, which so now you might have to comment on this, they have changed their basic charges to accommodate the different inverter sizes, which I wasn't in agreement with. But because the inverter size technically has got nothing to do with the utilization of the grid per se, because the grid is governed by NRS standards. So NRS 097 would say to you, listen, you can only do like 25% in any case. So yeah, I wasn't fully on board with this method. So we're trying to change this to make it a flat rate as well until we have a better position with time of use tariffs to move to the new net billing rules now. So yes, in short,
yes.
our basic charges at Plet was not the same as the normal customer charges that they had.
Thank you. Thank you, Jermaine. Anyone else wants to chip in, colleagues, before I respond? Okay. So thanks a lot for that, Jermaine. And you say that the reason why it wasn't the same, you try to average out between two types of customers to say, I've got a 60 amp customer, I've got an 80 amp customer. What is the average basic charge? And then you charge that to your residential customers. Okay. So colleagues, so this is what we propose, right? First things first, all tariffs are informed by a cost of, so let's listen to each other here. So all electricity tariffs should be informed by a cost of supply study, right? So a cost of supply study is going to say, for example, for a residential customer connected to a 60 amp breaker, because 60 amp implies the capacity you've made available for a specific type of customer, right? And then it's going to say how much the basic charge to recover fixed cost for a 60 amp customer is going to be. A cost of supply is also going to tell you for an 80 amp customer, what is the fixed charge, right? Stay with me here. So when this customer now, the same customers, 60 amp and 80 amp on both sides, when the same customers now decide to go buy a 3 kilowatt PV system and put it on their roof, right? What changes to that customer? Except for the fact that now they have introduced a solar PV customer. It's still connected at the same point in the network. The capacity available for the customer is still the same. You know, the only possible change that could be there for that particular customer is the administration that has to do with bidirectional metering. That is the only thing, right? So in principle, the fixed charge of a normal customer, 60 amp customer, and the normal 60 amp customer with PV shouldn't be so different, because not much changes. Because fixed costs, you remember, these are capital costs and your operational costs. Nothing much changes for serving that same customer once they start to install solar PV, other than possibly an additional administrative cost, you know. So for example, in BITO, I'm going to give it to you now, Jermaine. So for example, in BITO, for the two types of customers, right? For those two types of customers, right? Jermaine had the option in BITO to introduce, for all the customers in 60 amps, for example, to introduce a fixed charge, right? That is still the same as the normal customers, and all the other customers on 80 amps to introduce what? To introduce the fixed charge that is the same as 80 amps. But then it deviated from cost reflectivity and introduced an average cost, right? You can deviate from cost reflectivity in the way Jermaine has done in BITO, right? As long as you can substantiate why. Okay, Jermaine, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Anau, and I fully agree with you. It's just that we wanted to have only one tariff at that time. It was a couple of years ago. I think that was like 2019 that we did that. That was like some of the first rounds, and we just kept that until this rules now changed, right? So there's a bit of context there, but I fully agree with you. But I might want to throw a spanner in the works just for us to think through. There was one particular municipality where we applied. Now, I've got two hats for those that don't know. I also do installations. So we applied to this one municipality for an SSEG registration. And what happened was that this municipality, they, as part of their policy, says that when you register the system, that 25% NMD of the NMD that is allowed for export on the NRS, they say that in order to protect their network from inrush currents, they use the NRS to say you must reduce your supply breaker to the inverter as well. Now, if your whole, so just think about this. If your whole house is powered by the inverter, which is, let's say, a 10 kilowatt or 12 kilowatt inverter, okay? And the municipality is now forcing you to reduce the input, the grid supply to that breaker. Doesn't that then mean that they have effectively reduced your capacity to utilize that? So there are certain municipalities that did that. I'm not saying everyone does that. So in principle, you might have a great point to say the basic charges could stay the same with the provision that you maybe recover some of the new smart metering costs and the new billing. So I get that. I'm fully with that. But there might be municipalities who imposes this kind of 15 amp circuit breaker going in there. Then that is a brand new basic chart situation that's going on there.
Yeah. Thank you, Jermaine. Listen, that is of course an outlier, because I don't want, I want to get into the revenue impact, because this is a topic that I can talk about the whole day. That is an outlier, the situation that you've explained. And I'm not sure if I'm in full agreement with it, but I also understand from the municipal perspective, trying to protect your own infrastructure, right? Because there's no way to be certain that solar PV customers will export 25%. So you need to put a physical restriction in the form of a breaker. But now it takes away from, let's say you were on 60 amps, now they take you all the way to 15 amps, for example. So it means even the current you are drawing from the grid is limited, meaning that, for example, if you had already invested in your house, invested in some fridges, in some nice, what is that, heating, floor heating, that draws more than 15 amps, now you are in trouble because you've installed or you are installing solar PV. So that one is interesting. Of course, it is an outlier. At this stage, I'm not sure if I'm in agreement with that approach, but of course, municipalities are free to do as they please. Okay, colleagues, I want to get into the tool. These conversations are very nice, but let us get back into the tool. Our position, let me put our position. And of course, you are more than welcome to deviate from this position. Our position is that fixed costs are determined by a cost of supply. And the fixed costs must not discriminate whether you are solar PV or not. A fixed cost is a fixed cost. Just because you have installed some solar PV, it doesn't now make you eligible to pay a fixed cost and others don't. So if you are the same type of customer, today I didn't have solar, I was paying a variable charge with no fixed cost. Tomorrow I put solar on my roofs, you come and introduce a fixed cost. Colleagues, that is not our position. Our position is that I must have the fixed cost before and I must maintain that fixed cost even after I've installed my PV. That's our position. But of course, colleagues, you are free to do as you please. All right, I need to get into this tool. I know maybe there are still more questions, but